Thank you for inviting me to this event. I do want to introduce two of my colleagues who came with me, who've made this evening possible. Rachel Sample, who I think is hiding in the booth back there. She spent countless hours filming, editing, interviewing, and working on this talk. And Mary Helen Klossing, who is next to the handout table, is the Director of Social Services at Rose Villa. She has deep knowledge of end-of-life issues, hospice, family dynamics, and all the things you can imagine we run into in a thriving community of seniors. Most of you know far more than I do about the subjects we will be exploring tonight and throughout the day tomorrow. More about contemplative approaches, more about death, more about caregiving, more about life. So I just want to be clear with all of you that I am a student of these things as well. Reading something recently by Judith Leaf has helped me put my head into this talk, however. She said, or wrote, "I learned that you do not have to wait to get over your fear before undertaking something new. You could just be afraid and go ahead anyway." So here I am. So what I do understand, what I intuitively understand, and what makes meaning for me is the concept of community. And I feel strongly that death and dying is a community event, every bit as important an anchor for us all as birth is. I also believe strongly that the gifts Naropa has to offer my field in particular, gerontology, are profound and are not found many places. I know deep in my heart and from well over a decade now of experience that aging is a blessing and a gift, and one that we ignore at our peril. I'm completely excited to be part of an effort to better understand end of life, to further share the unique gifts of the Naropa educational perspective, and to be part of a practical, hands-on, multidisciplinary, multi-faith, heterogeneous, unruly, and passionate mob who care about and value what I originally called, way back when I decided to leave my well-paying job and go into the field of aging, the filet mignon of life. And I do understand that death and dying are not only something that happens to elders, but I believe that we can learn a lot from the lessons that our elders care to teach us. I will share something I wrote in the journal I kept during my first years in the field of aging at Naropa many years ago. I have learned more than once in the last year, and I just love learning the same lesson over and over again, that regardless of how your thought processes may have formed earlier in your life, as you move into later stages, your mind gets less and less linear. A lot of my own work is revolving around getting comfortable with that process in elders. Virtually every time I become frustrated with something that I label as being too wandering or rambling, I get a knock on the head as true gems emerge. The slight edge of chaos to some of our discussions demonstrate that nothing is really off limits. I love to hear elders' stories, to work with them and be silly. I find it so easy to unwind myself and be present and have things come to me when I'm engaged in this way. It places me deep within the human stream. I feel shepherded, protected, loved, and honored by them. As Rabbi Shachter Shalomi says, the elder is an agent of evolution. Tomorrow, I will focus more on specific ways to connect with the death process, tools to help communicate, methods to strengthen your own caregiving resilience, and deepen your understanding. Tonight, I will fly a little higher than that, but just know it does all tie down to the ground. One of my residents did just this in one of our recent interviews. I'd like you to meet Jean, who has a lot of experience with our subject tonight. Uh-oh. But there really is sound. Not that, though.
I don't know, it's pretty straightforward that you're going to die.
So I don't play this just for the laughs. I know we're talking about subjects that can be emotional, and many of you are very tender in this space for all kinds of reasons. It's an area I am in a lot, and it's part of my regular language and my terrain. So please stop me if you need to take a break. or you want to ask a question, or you feel the need to explore something in more depth, or you need to add to the conversation. This is your room. It is kind of a radical notion that is gathering steam in various parts of the country with groups like the Death Cafe, conferences like this one, and the recent Death OK conference in Portland, Oregon, workshops in this space such as Die Wise, death doula trainings. It's very encouraging. It looks as if we may be bringing death out of the closet. One of the last great taboos is starting to crumble, moving from a very old school fear that talking about death might actually cause it to happen to a profound appreciation of death as part of life's journey. Death is not a mistake. It is not a pathology. It is not a disease. It is a vital part of the whole with tremendous power to give meaning and purpose to all that has gone before. I work at Rose Villa, an eclectic senior living community in Portland, Oregon, and how you pronounce it is Oregon. Our core values are start with yes, embrace quirky, curiosity is critical, and assume positive intent. It's an unusual group, and I am proud to partner with them in all sorts of ways. For the past 3 years or so, we've had a group of residents, staff, and community volunteers on campus who have joined together to create a group called Comfort Companions. The explicit point of this group is to sit with people who are dying so that no one travels alone, with the explicit permission and request of those souls, of course. This group was not my idea. It came from the residents of Rose Villa who have enormous experience with death, dying, frailty, age, courage, and the power of community. To ground myself for this conference, my colleagues and I interviewed every one of the Comfort Companions, and we asked them all kinds of questions about their experience with death, myths about dying, how to prepare for it personally as well as a companion to someone else who is dying. You will see short clips of their responses throughout my talk tonight and tomorrow. And as part of the materials we have available for you, we have a bibliography of books and websites you might find particularly useful in exploring some of the issues we will touch upon tonight. It is ridiculously subjective, but it could be helpful. We could have a 25-page bibliography, but it's short. There are a bunch of other handouts out there for background reading and then a few exercises that we'll be doing. As I was talking about this conference with one of the women who live at Rose Villa and who you'll see on video tonight, Joanne, she immediately challenged me with, well, what is the definition of end of life? When does it begin? Great question. Let's start there. It seems almost everything in our Western way of life is consistently and furiously trying to force our experience into a straight line, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Keep it in order, for heaven's sake. There are phases to our lives, we know what they are, and hey, you there, get back in line. Stick to the plan. That question pulls on an important thread, which is simply that in the same way you are constantly beginning, you are also constantly preparing for endings and transitions. It is so hard for us to accept that we are all becoming. We just want to pin it down. Here's who I am. Now I have fixed it. This is how it is. But nothing is static. Everything is becoming. When you think of the poet Mary Oliver's piercing question, what do we do with our one wild and crazy life? That is not a question that pops up as you graduate from college and you have a month and a half to figure it out. That is a question you should ask every single morning of your life. And there is nothing like working with elders closely every day to make you understand everything you think you know or have been taught about life's trajectory is wrong. The real world, real life, is so much bigger, more complex, and more chaotic, richer in every way than anything you can imagine. So the answer to that question, when does the end of life begin, is now. Let's think of it as weaving our way into the world and out of it, and keep the beginning, middle, and end notions off to the side where they belong as an interesting philosophical construct. Although almost everyone here has some experience of death or dying, in a certain sense, we can say that we're all death novices, as none of us have actually experienced it. And we are approaching it with the wide open curiosity of the beginner. Let's take a quick minute, though, and ask how death is actually experienced today in the U.S. Despite the expressed wishes of 80% of adults to die at home, surrounded by loved ones, the truth is that less than a quarter, 24% of Americans older than 65 die at home. Most die in hospitals and nursing homes. How does that happen? Large institutional forces are certainly at work. Insurance companies and the way medical care is reimbursed, big medicine culture that isolates death in the silo of healthcare, CYA legal concerns, yes, all of that. But it is also happening through the failure of anyone to actively pursue a conversation with the dying person in which their specific needs and wishes are solicited, expressed, and honored. As a note, I am so pleased that Atul Gawande wrote the book Being Mortal, and I suggest you all read it because I think that is one of the central tenets of his book. Each one of us personally can have a dramatic impact through those conversations. At the point at which people may be at their greatest risk for being ignored or marginalized, often in the grip of the medical system, we fail them by surrendering our community embrace in deference to some idea of the superiority of the experts or fear of overstepping. And by community, I explicitly include each person's personal and intimate community of family and beloved friends. So the practical portion of my talk tonight is to urge you to have those conversations. Virtually every dying person wants to have them, and you don't have to wait until someone's dying to have those conversations. The conversation, getting important legal documents signed, sharing those wishes, again with the approval of the dying person, with friends, family, and medical team, is incredibly important to help the people you care about have the death they want. This is the kind of thing that seems very obvious to me, given my professional work, but I am shocked at how often it is overlooked. So then I'm going to ask you a question right now. I'm just a little curious, and I hope I can see. How many of you have a healthcare power of attorney? Please raise your hands. Okay. How about a living will? Excellent. How about a regular will? Very good. Not 100% by any means, but not too embarrassing. That's good. Opening the door to these conversations for yourself may help others to initiate their own. And if your hands are in your lap, I would encourage you to think about that. What the research shows is that greater intensity of medical services correspond with higher costs, but not with longer survival or better health outcomes. In fact, in areas where a higher level of medical intervention is the norm, patients have comparatively poorer functional outcomes and lower satisfaction with care. Another surprising research finding is that people who opt for palliative care or hospice actually live longer with better functional outcomes than those who do not. So there are real, practical, important outcomes to having these talks, and the sooner the better. So we're going to start right now. I'd like to give you a tool to start a conversation of your own with someone you care about. But first, the facts. There is a big gap between what people say they want and what actually happens. So 90% of people say that talking with their loved ones about end-of-life care is important, and about 27% have actually done so. 60% of people say that making sure their family is not burdened by tough decisions is extremely important, but over half have not communicated their end-of-life wishes. 80% of people say that if seriously ill, they would want to talk to their doctor about wishes for medical treatment toward the end of their life. 7% report having had this conversation with their doctors. 82% of people say it's important to put their wishes in writing, and about 23% have actually done that. So there are materials that we have here that say on the top where I stand. It's a scorecard. If anyone does not have one of those, if you'd raise your hand, we'll make sure you get one. And I can't see anything, but I bet you can out there. Everybody, okay. We're going to pass those out now. You can go down the middle and just pass them that way. Yeah. I didn't really expect you all to just pick up a bunch of paper on your way in, so that's fine. And these materials come from the Conversation Project, which has a fantastic website and is also a supporter of this conference. and I encourage you to check out all the tools they have there. So take a minute as we get those. We're going to read through them briefly. And if you have a pen, I would love it if you would actually write on that piece of paper or pencil. If you don't, that's okay. By the rustling, it feels like perhaps we're fully papered now. Okay. Okay, so in the scorecard where I stand, the first block of scores are talking about how you feel. So as a patient, I'd like to know, and it's a range, from 1, only the basics about my condition and my treatment, all the way through 5, all the details about my condition and my treatment. So just indicate where you feel you stand in that range, from only the basics through all the details. The second question is, as doctors treat me, I would like, from 1, my doctors to do what they think best, all the way through 5, I want to have a say in every decision. And if I had a terminal illness, I would prefer to, 1, not know how quickly it is progressing, all the way up to know my doctor's best estimation for how long I have to live. Look at your answers to those 3 questions. What kind of a role do you want to have in the decision-making process? The next section thinks about medical care itself. How long do you want to receive medical care? From 1, indefinitely, no matter how uncomfortable treatments are, through 5, quality of life is more important to me than quantity. What are your concerns about treatment? From 1, I'm worried that I won't get enough care, all the way up through 5, I'm worried that I'll get overly aggressive care. Where on that spectrum do you fall? And what are your preferences about where you want to be? From, I wouldn't mind spending my last days in a healthcare facility, all the way through, I want to spend my last days at home. So look at those answers. What do you notice about the kind of care you want to receive? Thinking about the community around you. How involved do you want your loved ones to be? From 1, I want my loved ones to do exactly what I've said, even if it makes them a little uncomfortable, through 5, I want my loved ones to do what brings them peace, even if it goes against what I've said. That is not an easy one. When it comes to your privacy, from 1, when the time comes, I want to be alone, through 5, I want to be surrounded by my loved ones. And when it comes to sharing information, 1, I don't want my loved ones to know everything about my health, to, I am comfortable with those close to me knowing everything about my health. So look at those answers. What role do you want your loved ones to play? Do you think that your loved ones know what you want? Or do you think they have no idea? This is a good way to open the door to talk about these very same issues with those you love, so that you're sure that you know what their wishes are, and you can take the opportunity to really explore their feelings around these questions. I don't know what it is, but taking a questionnaire is easier to get a conversation started sometimes than a direct, more personal approach, depending on who you're talking to. My mother will take a questionnaire anytime, and then you can talk about the answers, and all of a sudden you have a real conversation. So more examples of this kind of thing can be found on the Conversation Project website. Dying is a very dynamic event. It affects so much more than the dying person. There are many roles to play, and those roles can shift among people and over time. As someone transitions out of the life they've lived, everyone connected to them also faces a change in their identity. This is part of death as a community event, and why the opportunity for community to support and engage with that transition is so important. As people begin to deal with their mortality, they may appear to change who they are. Society puts a lot of boundaries on people. To accommodate them and survive, we can become closed in and bury our true heart's expression. As people age, and as they come to face the end of their life, they may be able to shed those restrictions. After a lifetime of looking outward, paying attention to markers of progress with jobs, family, money, achievement, they may feel the pull to look inward. This can be very upsetting for those who are close to them, who are already afraid of them leaving, and who may feel things are changing and out of control. As my resident and friend Joanna said, this process of getting older and dying is a process of turning from the external to the internal. Almost by definition, then, it means you will leave some connections and associations behind and make new ones. For the person who's dying, it can be frightening to let go of things that used to have great meaning, but also it can feel freeing. How can you support those you love and care for in their own internal journey and put your attachments to who they were aside? At the same time, how can you be with them in the moment on their journey of who they are right now and who they are becoming? It means that you are also becoming right now. Again, it is so helpful to remember that death is not binary. It's not an on-off. This might be news to you. It really is not an on-off. It's not good, bad. It's a process. It's a journey. It's a becoming. I'm going to play 3 clips from 2 residents about this shift in focus and how death presents itself as a process. Joanna's been at Roseville a relatively short time, while Lois has lived there almost 10 years.
But I think it's more about moving from the external to the internal and finding more of a sense of mysticism with both the universe and myself.
And the other myth is that death is an event. It's not an event, it's a process. Dying is a process. And it's nothing. Few people die, like in 5 minutes, but that's very, very rare. Most people have a long process of dying. And if we could do it better and make sure people are never alone, if they could be felt that they have a level of control clear to the end, which is what hospice does, then it's a much nicer process. Kinder, gentler.
What I'm saying is, I think the process of dying starts at birth. So the bottom line is, I think when you get to that end of your life kind of stage, which I see as that time when you're focused, this way rather than this way, I think then there's a lot of myths about, who you should be in this situation, that you don't have any intelligence, that you really are too old to know what's going on, you get all those, and then the physical, that there must be deterioration and that it's going to happen pretty rapidly, and that a disease, like I had cancer, for instance, it's going to end your life, that's it. I had cancer, so I'm done for, which is not true. I think there's just a whole different vision of end of life when you're focused on, sort of what you're, on the positive, on gratitude and positives and what in your life speaks to you and being present to the moment and those kinds of things. I think even probably in the process of dying, in those last days, I suspect, I know, because I know people who are in the present moment kind of situation and have a very, sort of connection with the divine and the universe and the people around them and whatever, have a whole different process of dying.
But how can you even come to grips with the fact that you're all moving into the unknown? Everything is changing for them and for you. This requires being comfortable with not knowing who you are, who the other person is, what the journey looks like. You must be patient and something will come up. Be aware the dying person is transforming. Help them to continue to be seen in the present tense. Understand that you don't know. Each person's journey is unique. It is not necessarily sad. We are doing 2 things here tonight: preparing for a positive death experience, your own and someone else's, and learning a little bit about sitting with death as it happens. They're not the same thing, but each informs the other. One of the handouts on the table that we like gives an example of a life review. It's a series of questions you can fill out for yourself about how you see your life, and ask questions of your loved ones about how they see your life. The questions are things such as, one event that had a big effect on my life was, or if I were to live my life over again, something I would change is, or if I could give one piece of advice to someone, it would be. It's another tool to help to know someone through their transition and to stay beside them, to learn what is important to them. You cannot take it for granted, especially someone that you've known for a long time. They're learning stuff right now. They would like to share it with you. All of this is foundational to create a vigil plan, which results in a positive and meaningful experience for the dying person, and ideally for their community. As a participant and observer, rather than the dying person herself, you must understand that you cannot create a positive death for someone, but you can do your best to understand their values and beliefs and support them in the choices they make. We actually have another exercise, which we need to hand out, and that's the vigil plan. So we probably could have figured out how to do this more efficiently. So this exercise, I'd like to work through an example of a vigil plan. We don't have to write anything down, but I want to take you through it really fast. It's not so very different from a birthing plan that many of us have done in previous lives. And in these materials, there's a table divided into 4 sections. There's lots of things you can think about including there, but we've looked at 4 different areas to focus on as you think about how death occurs. So the environment itself, pain management, medical intervention, and post-death wishes as sort of the building blocks of a vigil plan. There is no right answer. You can do anything you want to do. It's just some ideas. And another way, once you've had these conversations, you can continue to work on really practical understanding of what you or your loved one might want as they die. I don't know how fast these are coming around. So I can talk through it, and then you'll have it with you for later. So in the environment, questions like, where physically do you picture yourself dying? Are you with other people? If you are, who are they? And maybe why are they there? Or are you alone? What are you wearing? Is there music? What does it sound like? Is it live? What do you see around you? What is the lighting like? Are there fragrances or smells? Are there spiritual activities occurring? The list can be very extensive. For pain management, questions like, do you want as much pain medication as necessary to be comfortable? If your pain cannot be controlled, would you want to be sedated? Would you rather be alert and in pain, or pain-free but groggy or unconscious? And is dependence on pain medication a concern of yours? For many older people, it is a strange and weird thing that surfaces, that they're concerned about becoming addicted to pain meds as they die. So it's good to have that conversation so you know if they have that in their head. Medical intervention. Is it important for you to live as long as possible in any condition? Is a shorter life of higher quality more important? What is a high quality of life for you? What are the things that you look toward in your daily life that say to you, this is a good day? What would be unacceptable to you? Do you want artificial hydration or nutrition? What about ventilator care? What about CPR? And finally, post-death wishes. Do you want your loved ones to sit with your body for a period of time after death? Do you want music after death, specific music? Do you want after-death massage or anointing, incense? Are there spiritual readings or prayers you would like said in the time after death? Do you want others to view your body? Do you want to be an organ donor? And do you want burial or cremation? There are many things. This is not the same thing as a funeral. This is immediately after death. What happens in that space? This is just another tool, a different take at how to open the door to understanding what is important to people that you care about and care for in order to help create the most positive death experience we can. Incorporating any kind of ritual that is meaningful to you can be an appropriate part of the vigil plan, either before or after your death. People can forget about the after-death part. It's just as important. There are no right answers, and certainly there are 1,000 ways to express your wishes. Turning to the residents of my community, who have spent considerable time sitting with people as they experience death, I noticed as I went through the interviews of all the people in the Caring Companion program, it was remarkable how each one offered up their own description of basic attendance as a critical skill for someone who sits with a dying person. None of these people are Buddhist. None of them have studied Buddhism or basic attendance, and yet they absolutely understand how to create the container each dying person needs. Please meet Roseville resident Pat and Susan, who's a volunteer in our 24-hour nursing center, as well as a member of our Comfort Companion group.
I relate that a lot to attitudes also. Some of the skills that I identified or can identify would be certainly, some people might say it's not a skill, but I say personal presence with someone who is dying. And I think listening is one of the skills high on my list. Observation is also very high on my list as a skill. When we walk in the room, to me it's very important for me to stop and really observe what's happening, both with the patient and with other aspects of the room. What's in the room? Are there family members? So observation and listening are really key, top of my list.
First of all, you think of something like empathy, but also I think you need to step back from yourself, and that's sometimes what I struggle with. So I feel like I'm still maybe developing that skill, which is I was talking it over with my husband last night. I feel like I need to, when I walk into the space where the person is lying in bed, and I realize the enormity of what is happening. I feel like I want to put a cloak of peace over my shoulders so that I can be in that space. So I want to forget. I need to step back from whatever was going on at home or while I was driving. And so I think that's a skill I'm still working on. This is the way I feel for myself anyway. I don't say that all comfort companions, need to approach it, because I think we all approach death differently.
Cloak of peace, being curious, attentive, alive to the person you are sharing this time with. These people have been part of many transitions, and their path comes through very clearly. Follow the dying person where they lead. As they move into this space, you must focus on the fact that you are doing nothing. They are doing. You are being, supporting, witnessing, loving. You are not doing. This takes considerable emotional courage, and may be harder the closer you are to the dying person. To do this work, you must face your own fears of death. Be prepared to listen, accept, offer space and warmth for the dying to exist and speak in. Offer up your own full, broken heart without reservation. This completely closes the space between you. You're facilitating a process, celebrating a life transition. You must be able to listen, be able to hold silence, and understand that not everything we know and do is conscious. Have intuition and trust it. Accept the experience that is happening, the person you are with. Whatever the emotions that arise in you, accept them and let them go. For the dying person, what is the work we can help with? Many of you may already be familiar with David Kessler's 5 stages of spiritual reconciliation. These are very helpful as you enter into the world of the dying person. It can help you orient to where that person is, what they need to do, how you might be able to help them. But be careful. Don't get back into doing. You're still being. It's hard to keep the clipboard to the side as you get the 5 stages, You're using these as tools to help you find them so you can join them where they are. You're not fixing anything, nor can you. An understanding of these stages can certainly help you to have more conversations, and maybe more relevant conversations with the dying. People are at different developmental stages when they face death. It is important to help them live those last days, not die them. Similarly to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 Steps of Grief, Kessler outlines stages of spiritual reconciliation that might happen from the point of view of the person who is dying as expression, So that is overcoming your personal taboos or societal ones and expressing your true feelings about your loved ones, what is happening to your body, anger toward God for letting this happen. But release the feelings that you've been keeping in check. And you don't have to tell anyone else about them. You have to admit them to yourself. Say them to yourself. Once you can let them go, their hold on you dissipates. Another stage is responsibility, that you are responsible for your own life and choices, that you're not a failure because you're dying, but that you have played an active role in everything your life has brought and everything that has happened to you. Another stage is forgiveness. As Kessler says, unforgiveness is an open wound, your wound. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're accepting bad behavior or absolving someone. You have to do it for your own sake, to become whole, to release yourself from negative feelings. This includes forgiving yourself. This is your death. Acceptance. At a certain point, optimism becomes denial. Denial of the real experiencing you're having right now. You don't have to like what you accept, but there comes a time when you need to accept what is happening. Every life is complete regardless of when it ends. And gratitude. If you haven't been able to work through any issues, it is possible to feel profound gratitude for good and bad experiences, for what you've learned, suffered, experienced, for who you are, for the gift of your life. Another take on this subject is presented by Ira Byock in his book, The Best Care Possible, great book. His expression of this work is just a different way of saying some of the same things and how to think through the spiritual work that may come through the process of dying. He believes there are 5 expressions that could be critical for closure in important relationships. They are, forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, I love you, and goodbye. As we think about preparing for death, there are structural supports that can be very meaningful, rituals and practices. We suffer from a lack of ritual in our lives overall. Ritual for the person who is actively dying can be an incredibly positive component of the transition. There are more obvious rituals, weddings, funerals, that sort of thing. There are rituals that occur in slightly different areas, like special birthdays, graduation, divorce, all different kinds of ways to mark important things that have happened. Anyone who's gone through a ritual can mark how they feel afterwards from how they felt before. Something transforms in you after you have experienced a ritual for an important moment. Rituals can be especially helpful when you feel you have little control over the outcome. The way mourning rituals are expressed are wildly different and even contradictory around the world and in different cultures. Research suggests that rituals to alleviate grief work, and that writing about engaging in a ritual helps decrease feelings of grief more than simply writing about the loss itself. So ideas, and we have a little thing you can take with you with other ideas. If you're spiritual, certainly a prayer service or guided meditation can allow you to acknowledge the gifts you've received in this life. You may want to explicitly recognize the grace in your body and be thankful for the years you were able to use it. Perhaps surrendering the parts that are no longer useful or are in pain. A chaplain or other spiritual teacher can partner with you to create something like this. A meditation or prayer circle with your closest family and friends. You may want to make something that is yours alone to give to people who have meaning for you. Maybe part of the ritual is to make it with them. You could gather possessions or photographs and give them to those who are important to you in a similar ritual. It may be important to write letters of love and gratitude to those closest to you. Have a journal or a basket with pieces of paper in it, and when people visit, they can jot down a memory of a favorite time with you, or a saying that you're known for, or a joke that you've shared. Those can be read by you or to you during your dying process, and after death, perhaps, can be kept as a keepsake for your family and a way to honor and remember your life. Perhaps you can brainstorm a ritual for your own or someone else's vigil plan. Think about the environment. Keep it simple. Focus on what is really important. Do the hard stuff first. It is all about goodbye. And focus on completion, not perfection. One ritual that I really like that is developed in the Zen hospice in Santa Barbara is as the mortuary folks take the body from the house after death, they walk through the garden, and the tradition has become to stop there and have everyone put flower petals on the body before it leaves. This has come to include not only the staff and other hospice residents, but the mortuary drivers want to do it also. The point of ritual is to create sacred space. It is completely individual. There's no wrong way to do it. The goal of the space is for the dying person to gather a sense of love, power, completion, safety, and energy. It is a blessing to those who are left behind as well, as it helps people connect, to say what they need to say, to cry or sing or express their love for the person who is dying. There's a lot going on with people who are dying. One of my professors at Naropa, the amazing Virginia Howard, put it this way: when you're with someone in a nursing home who's unresponsive and has been in a coma for a period of time, there's quite a bit of judgment about that person, their quality of life. You may feel pity and sadness for them. Is it not possible to understand them as a sort of planetary monk who is in deep meditation, doing serious spiritual work, which they will not break until their work is done? That was one of my earliest inklings that what we know is but a tiny sliver of what may actually be real. What you have to offer is an attentive mind and a tender heart, a beginner's approach, always loving kindness, and a willingness to create space and safety. How can you come to grips with the fact that you're all moving into the unknown? It is hard. As one dying person said, death is the least of my worries. I always knew it would happen someday, but it's watching part of me die each day that is so terrifying. The final months or hours of life should be a powerful place. It is not a place for victims. It's as primitive and powerful as birth. So what actually happens as the body starts to shut down? Death can take a while, as Lois reminded us. The divide between here and not here thins as you near transition. I will give you an example of a resident, a person that I knew well, Esther, an army wife, a very harsh communicator, had an angry life, a difficult marriage. Her grown children were terrified of her. She's a person as far from woo-woo as I could imagine even making up. Not long before she died, she had a fall in her room. There were no injuries, but she was able to get back up in her chair, which we were surprised at, given the level of frailty of her body. When we asked her about it, she said it was no problem. Laura had helped her up. Laura was the previous resident of the room, deceased for over a year. One of the caregivers on site said, "But Laura's gone," to which Esther responded, gesturing, "Well, she's right there." I saw her do that. It's common to hear of dying people seeing people who are deceased, experiencing a crowd in the room where they are alone, feeling as if they are getting ready for a journey and that other people are there with them. Some recent research shows this starts to happen in dreams, sometimes several months prior to death, as people are preparing to transition. Just like with maternity wards, where everyone who has meaning to that new soul and family comes to greet the newborn, why would it be different at death? I'm just asking the question, because over and over, people report and talk about experiencing a crowd, or the room is overflowing with family members and others who are greeting you into this next experience. The baby is not aware of all the people out there who've come to greet her when she's born. Isn't it perhaps the same at death? All the lives that have touched us, they come to show us the way. The next clip is very personal and talks about the lasting relationship you can have beyond death.
I think the change came when my son died. My brother was killed when he was 18. 21. He had just finished college, and he was killed in a car accident. And my son that I lost was named after him. And so then when I lost Chuck, I don't know, you're not supposed to lose your kids, but there was something about him that I have a picture of him right by my microwave. And whenever I get something in or out of the microwave, I just touch it. And it's amazing how it calms me down. I just get this feeling that I might have contacted him. I don't have any idea what the universe says about that, but anyway, I just, his way with me, he understood me really well. And I think that part I received from him again.
Everyone has a different belief about the soul or spirit and what happens after death. I am not selling one in particular, I promise. But there is a theme among the residents who have spent so much time around death that something different happens to your body than happens to the rest of you. I have another resident to talk to you.
For me, the myth is that life ends when the body dies.
Tell me more about that.
I don't think consciousness ends when the body dies. The physical container for the soul dies, but the soul, which is part of living being, the view that I have, and my school's view is there's one living being. The entirety of the world, the cosmos, is one living being, and with unique particulars. So each soul is a unique particular, precious, and the way that the living being grows and develops is through each soul's experience. Makes me happy when I say that.
I don't know the answer, of course, but I find it very interesting that so many people have so many experiences that suggest at least some continuation of some kind. When death has occurred, take your time. Many people believe that the spirit is still close to the body for some time after death. Talk to your loved one, hold hands, pray, sing, wish her well in her journey. Do what feels right for you. It will be right for both of you, even though the physical connection has ended, the emotional one is not. Acceptance of death frees up the energy we spend fighting our fear of death. This is as true for the caregiver as it is for the dying person. Paradoxically, accepting death allows us to live life more fully. This acceptance is tied to the shift from doing to being. It's part of the switch from the dominance of logical thought to a more intuitive emotional mode. Turning away from a lifetime's emphasis on external achievement, productivity, and accomplishment to now focus on one's inner core requires a brave and gentle heart. Mortality is important to spiritual growth. It's a source of inspiration. It is only the understanding that life is finite, that there's an absolute limit to the possibilities to come that gives direction to life and charges it with potential. We've been talking about this, having a good death, doing the work. Here are some tools for it suggested by my residents, Pat and Bud and Charlotte.
The link between dying and spirituality?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. They write books about that. Well, it's one of the major focuses of dying, and one of the major focuses of preparing to die, and one of the major outcomes of dying in a lot of the world religions. So to me, it's not only central, but top priority to have some understanding, a chance to process when the person's dying, to process their relationships, to process anything that needs to be forgiven, to do all kinds of things spiritually, to pray to the Creator, or to, just come to some kind of clarity where they are as far as their relationship with the Creator.
We sat with our spouses when they were dying, and this taught us a lot about how to deal with people. One of the things that we both did was talk about death with our spouses before they before they went onto hospice. The first time I talked to my wife about death was 20 years before she died. And that was kind of an intellectual thing, but we tried to get into how we would feel about this. And but it helped in preparation for when it happened. And at each step, we would talk about what her wants were, and after she died, I said, I had no what ifs or wish I had us, and you expressed it differently.
Mm-hmm. The same thing.
Well, you said no unfinished business.
Yeah.
Keeping death in the closet robs us of all those insights, the depth that lies within each of us, the growth that is possible. Sure, it can be scary, but what isn't? It's just like the question posed by Dr. Bill Thomas 10 years ago in my field of gerontology. What are old people for anyway? What's dying for anyway? It's how we become more fully human. The medicalization of this part of our lives subverts our core drive to care for one another. It ignores cultural roles. It weakens the skills and ability that lie within each of us and within our intimate community and family groups to provide a healthy, wise, loving vessel for each member as we go through the immense and awe-inspiring changes that come with living a full and long life. A story about Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, is telling. She was asked what she considered to be the earliest evidence of civilization. Her answer was that it was a 15,000-year-old site from which a human thigh bone with a healed fracture had been excavated. She said that for an early human being to have survived a broken femur like that, with months of being unable to share in the hunt or be productive to the group, meant that person was sheltered, protected, fed, was cared for. Civilization, community. Being fully present at death and birth and all the major touchstones that we go through is the essence of community. It is the context of our lives together. It is where joy and pain have meaning. I'd like to take a minute to get centered in our bodies. My colleague Rachel will help us with this. Just step aside.
I'll just stand next to you.
Okay.
Hi. You've been sitting for quite a while, so I just encourage you to keep your feet firmly planted on the floor. We're going to do just a little bit of breathing before heading into the next section with Vassar. Please place your feet flat on the floor or whatever is comfortable for your seat. Keep your tailbone down and grounded into your chair. Lay your hands in a resting position, whatever feels comfortable for you, and please gaze down or close your eyes, but focus inward. Lift your ears to elongate your spine. And we're just going to do a counted breath to get present. And we'll start with an inhalation of 4 and an exhalation of the equal count. I will count, but please take this at your own pace. So inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. One more breath in. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, and 4. Please take a minute to sit with yourself as we continue with Vassar. Thanks.
And while we're still in this space, I'd like to borrow again from Judy Leaf. I'd like you to reflect back on your life to the point at which it first began. When you first appeared. When did you appear? Where were you before that? Where did you come from? Now go forward in your life to the point at which it ends and you are no longer here. What will happen to you then? Where will you go? How is it possible for your life to end and you no longer to exist? reflect on your life now, sandwiched between your birth and your death, and utterly unique. Where are you now? What is this all about? Thank you. I will end with words written to me by Roseville resident Joanne McClarty, the nun, thinking about what end of life means to her. Ultimately, it is love given and received, human and divine, that brings peace to the end of life. I can't believe I have lived 80 miraculous, grace-filled years. The rest will be the icing on the cake. When the candles go out, it will be a celebration of a life lived and a look into the mystery beyond. Thank you so much.